In this video, I'll discuss finishing up your 2D shooter project. Your objectives will be to back up the tutorial project, then expand and modify the project to make it your own, then gather screenshots, create the final builds, compress the builds for distribution, publish the game to the internet, and provide the URL to the location of your game for assessment. Okay, I demoed several of these steps in detail in the Solar System project, but let me give a quick review while spending a bit more time on some new things. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to create a backup version of my project. So once again, I could quit out of Unity to get rid of that temp folder that was in my projects folder. And I want to actually just back up my project folder. So let me go back one level so I can see the overall project folder. And I want to duplicate this. So on Windows, I can just right click and choose copy, and then right click where I want to and choose paste and create a duplicate of that. Now on the Mac, you could just right click and select duplicate. Okay, then I can just rename this copy as something like 2D shooter -backup. Can maybe timestamp it if I want to have multiple backups and that sort of thing. Once again, the reason I'm making a backup is if there's an issue with any of the modifications that I do in the next step, I could always go back to the backup. But for now, let me open Unity Hub again and open up the 2D shooter project. The next step is to do modifications to the project over and beyond the tutorial as defined in the assignment. The modifications can focus on art, design, or programming tasks, or you can mix and match across disciplines. Try to really make the game unique, make it your own, and try to entertain your potential players as well as impress your peers and your instructor. It may take some time to implement and test your modifications, so give yourself ample time. Remember, game development is an iterative process. For demoing purposes, I'm going to just pretend that my modifications have been made and continue on with the finishing up steps. In the assignment, it asks you to include screenshots of your game. There are a number of ways to get a screenshot, as we discussed in the Solar System project. However, when getting screenshots of the game itself, I have provided an elegant way to do it right from within Unity itself in the form of a screenshot utility prefab that you can include in your project. Let me demo that for you. So inside of the prefabs folder with the assets that were provided, there is a utilities folder, and in that is the screenshot utility prefab. And you want to just drag and drop this into the main menu scene. So if you don't have the main menu scene open, go ahead and open that first, and then bring in the screenshot utility. And what this game object is it's simply an empty game object that includes the screenshot utility script. And what the script does is it captures screenshots when you press the specified key. So right now it's mapped to the C key, and you can override this and change this to whatever you want. But I'll just keep it as the C key for now. Now when it grabs a screenshot, it grabs it at whatever size the game view is currently set at. So notice right now I'm in free aspect ratio. So I want to actually set a specific game size. So if I click the little drop down here, I could pick something like full HD, which is 1920 by 1080, or something else, or you can actually click the plus here and specify, whatever pixel dimensions you want. So for example, 960 by 600 if that's what you wanted, and you can give that a label. I'm going to just cancel this and pick full HD because 1920 by 1080 is a very common size to get screenshots for. Now I could just go ahead and click play, and with the game playing, I could go ahead and hit the C key, and notice down in the bottom it will say the screenshot was captured. I'll start a new game, and as I'm playing, let me just grab a couple screenshots here. Okay, and stop that. So I actually hit it 3 times. And what this actually did, if I minimize, I can see that within that 2D shooter project, I've now got a screenshots folder that it created for me. And within that, I've got the 3 screenshots that I took. So I took one of the main menu, one of the game, and another one of the game itself. Of course, you could take time to get better screenshots, but the screenshot utility prefab is a great way to quickly capture screenshots from within Unity. So let me go back into Unity. Okay, the next step is to create builds of your project for the desired target platforms. Likely you will create builds for Windows, Mac OS, and WebGL. So once again, under the File menu, we can go to Build Settings. Make sure that you've got all of the scenes in your build and they're ordered properly. So once again, if I'm missing a scene, so for example, let me just delete the main menu. To add a scene, I would simply drag and drop it into the build settings. And then I want to order them so the first scene is what will come up first. So I want the main menu to come up first, so let me drag it to be the first option in scenes to build. Then we'll pick our target platform. So we'll start with PC, Mac, and Linux standalone, and I'm going to target the Windows platform. Once again, before I do my build, I'll go into player settings, and I might change some of these player settings. So for example, I might set a company name and a version number. I could modify the product name if I wanted to here. I can set a default icon so we don't use the Unity icon. I'll just pick one of these asteroid images for my icon. And I'll just leave everything else, the defaults for the PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. But I know I'm going to build for WebGL also, so let me go to the WebGL tab. And once again, under the publishing settings, you'll want to check this decompress fallback option, as we discussed in the Solar System project. And of course, you can modify the resolution and presentation options or any other options that you want, but I'm just going to go with the defaults for now. And let me go ahead, switch back to the PC, Mac, Linux option and build for Windows. Just like we did with the Solar System project, I highly recommend that you create a folder called Builds within your project folder. And then within that, make subfolders for each of the platforms that you're building to. So I'll make one for Windows, go into Windows and select it and build for Windows. Okay, my Windows build is done. I recommend double clicking it and testing it. For brevity purposes, let me just go back and I'm going to switch my target platform to Mac OS and then build for Mac OS. Once again, I'll create a new subfolder called Mac OS within that builds folder, and I will target the Mac OS folder. And once again, if you're building on Windows for Mac, for some reason it names it macOS.app, I would rename that file so it's something nicer for your Mac users. In this case, maybe I'll name it 2dshooter.app and then move it into that macOS folder. Once again, for some reason, Unity doesn't target the folder properly when you're building the Mac. And now I'll go back to Unity once again. I'll switch my platform to WebGL. So select WebGL and hit switch platform. Okay, and I've already set my player settings for the decompression fallback. So let me go ahead and build. Once again, we'll create a subfolder for WebGL. And then we'll go in and target that folder and start our build. Okay, I have my builds created. Once again, you should test all your builds, but for purposes of the course, at least test on the platform you're building the game upon. So if you're on Windows, test on Windows. If you're on Mac, test on Mac. Once you get your WebGL uploaded to the internet, go ahead and test that. So before we can do that, we need to compress our builds into a zip archive. So once again, the way you do that is you can just simply right-click on the respective build folder and say send to compressed zip folder on Windows. If you're on Mac, just right-click and select compress. And this will compress all the contents of that folder into a single zip file that we can upload to the internet. So let me do it for each of the platforms. So I'll do the WebGL and the Mac OS version. So now let's publish the game to the internet using itch.io as we did in the Solar System project. So let me go ahead and minimize Unity here and bring up my browser, and I'll navigate to itch.io. And I'm already logged in. If you're not logged in, go ahead and log in or create an account if you don't have an account. And let me go to my dashboard. And I've already got my Solar System project on here, but let me go ahead and click Create New Project. And you can name this whatever you like. I'm just going to call this 2D Shooter. And as before, we can upload a cover image, and I'll just use one of my screenshots for that. So let me navigate back to my 2D Shooter project and go into screenshots. And I will pick, a screenshot of the game for my cover image. And of course, you could make a custom cover image if you wanted to. And let me add my screenshots. And I'll include all three here. I always like to have the main menu. Ideally, you've made the main menu look nicer, and a couple from the game itself. And depending on the status of your project, once again, you can set the release status as either released or in development. And for pricing, pick no payments, so other learners and instructors can actually see your project and not have to pay for it. And then we'll upload our various builds. So once again, we'll navigate into the builds that we just created within the 2D shooter, and I will upload the various zip files. I'll start with the WebGL. And notice I don't have the option to include this in the page because I forgot above to change my kind of project from downloadable to HTML. So let me switch this to HTML. And once it's HTML down here, I can click this file will be played in the browser, which is what I want. And then let me upload my other two builds. So I'll pick the windows.zip file. And that includes the executable for Windows. So let me pick the Windows logo for that. And let me upload the Mac build zip file. And for the Mac build, it's an executable, and I'll pick the Apple logo for the Mac. And let me scroll down. For the embed options, I always like to change this to click to launch in full screen for WebGL. And then under details, follow what the assignment says. I think it asks you to list the modifications. So I might say something like, this is my 2D shooter project. Modifications, 1, 2, 3, and list those out. And then you can have credits and, created by, your name, and you can provide any additional credits you might have. Once again, we can pick the genre. For this project, it might just be something like action game. You can provide any additional download and installation instruction if those are needed. For community, leave the comments on so people can easily add comments to your project. And before we can set visibility, we have to save and view the project. Once again, your screenshots won't show up automatically. You have to edit the theme and then select screenshots option in layout to sidebar for the screenshots to show up, and then save that. And of course, there's other theming that you could possibly do. And let me go back and edit the game once again. And at the very bottom now, I can change my visibility to public so other people can see your project. And if you want to, you can click the configure settings option and then choose to have this unlisted in search and browse. So people won't be able to find your game unless you provide the direct URL to them. So let me save this once again and then view the actual game page. Once again, ideally, you should test all of the builds of your game. For purposes of this course, I do recommend testing at least on the platform you're on. And, you can always test the WebGL. So let me open that, just make sure my WebGL loads and brings up the game. And I can play that. And let me just escape out and go back. Okay, everything seems to be working, so I would just copy the URL for the itch.io game page for the assignment hand-in. The most important thing in the final step is to follow the instructions of the assignment in terms of the required modifications, what builds you should include, how to compress your builds, how to publish the project to the internet, and how to turn it in. Please reread the assignment while you go through these steps. I encourage you to strive to create something awesome. Something that you're proud of, something that you want to show off to your friends and family. In fact, you should get as many people as you can to play your game during development to help you improve the game, and once you're done, to celebrate what you've created. In any case, best of luck in finishing up your project.